The night my wife asked for another man. If someone had told me 5 years into my marriage that I'd be sitting across from my wife as she uttered the words, "I want another man," I'd have laughed in disbelief, not because it was impossible, but because we were solid, the kind of couple others came to for advice, or so I thought. It started like any ordinary Friday night. The kids were asleep. The house smelled of lavender and fabric softener, and Serena and I were sipping wine. On the patio, I remember her eyes that evening, not distant but searching, like she was gearing up to jump off a cliff and wasn't sure if she'd survive the fall. "You ever feel like we're just existing?" she asked. It was a question that should have led to a healthy conversation, but my ego took the bait. "What's that supposed to mean?" She sighed and leaned back, her fingers tightening around her glass. "I mean, we haven't really been close for months. We don't touch like we used to, don't talk like we used to." She wasn't wrong, but the truth is I had noticed too. I just didn't want to admit it. And then came the bombshell. "I've been thinking maybe we need to try something different, something drastic." I didn't speak, I couldn't. I knew what she was about to say. I felt it in my bones. "I want to experience being with another man, with you knowing, maybe even with you involved." The wine in my mouth turned bitter. My hand stiffened around the stem of the glass, but I didn't yell, I didn't even move, because deep down, part of me wasn't angry. Part of me was curious. Before we married, Serena had always been more adventurous than I was. She was the wild flame to my calm river. It was part of what attracted me to her in the first place. But somewhere between mortgages and meal prep, between PTA meetings and bills, we became partners in logistics, not lovers, not adventurers. I remember the first time we had a real conversation about fantasies. It was a late-night game of truth or dare when we were dating. She asked me if I'd ever imagined sharing her. I laughed and said no, and she smiled, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Now, 10 years later, that flicker had returned, but this time it burned. The next few days were a whirlwind of thoughts I didn't know how to process. At work, I found myself zoning out mid-meeting, replaying Serena's words like a broken record. We finally sat down that Sunday night. "I'm not saying I want to leave you," she said. "I just want to feel something different, something raw, something new, with your blessing." "What if I say no?" "I'll respect that," she whispered, "but I'll be broken inside." And there it was. My wife was craving something I couldn't give her. Or maybe something I hadn't tried to. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, eyes on the ceiling, imagining every possible outcome, from disaster to discovery. The next morning I gave her permission, not because I wanted to lose her, but because I wanted to understand her, us. We talked for hours about boundaries, about what this would look like, about emotions, safety, jealousy. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Serena cried when I said yes. She held my hand like she was both grateful and terrified. So was I. His name was Elijah, a mutual friend of a friend. She picked him because he was respectful, discreet, and had zero interest in stealing anyone's wife. He knew what it was, and he agreed to the terms. When I met him, I expected to hate him. Instead, I saw a man who understood his place in this strange dynamic. He wasn't charming or arrogant, he was too neutral. The night arrived, and I was there. No, not in the room, but in the house, a decision we had made together. Every moment felt like my heartbeat was a ticking bomb, and yet I wasn't falling apart. I was watching myself feel something entirely new. Fear, jealousy, arousal, curiosity, and surprisingly, respect. When she came to me afterward, I thought I'd see a stranger. But it was Serena, my wife, whole, radiant, tears in her eyes. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Thank you." We didn't speak much that night. Instead, we lay side by side, fingers intertwined in silence that said more than words could. The days that followed were strange. She was glowing, more present, more playful. And oddly, so was I. We had tapped into something buried deep, something raw, real and frighteningly beautiful. But nothing this intense comes without consequences. A week later, I felt it, a shift. I began wondering if Elijah was still on her mind. If I had opened a door that couldn't be closed, if I had set my marriage on fire to feel warmth again. I confronted her one evening. Was it worth it? I asked. She turned to me, surprised. Yes, but not because of him, because it reminded me who I am, who we are. But I wasn't satisfied with the poetic answer. I wanted certainty. I wanted proof that she hadn't fallen emotionally, that I hadn't agreed to something that would ruin us. I started checking her phone. Quietly at first, she noticed. You're spiraling, she said one morning. Talk to me, and I did. I told her I was scared, that the experiment was changing me too, and I didn't know if I liked it. We began going to therapy together, not because we were breaking, but because we were changing too fast to keep up. And in therapy, a new truth surfaced. I had been emotionally absent for over a year. Serena had been trying to reach me, and when she couldn't, she sought sensation elsewhere, not out of betrayal, but survival. It was a hard truth, but I took it. I owned it. Therapy became a mirror, sometimes uncomfortable, often revealing. For the first time in years, Serena and I peeled back the layers of routine and silence that had coated our marriage. We learned to listen without judgment. I learned to admit when I was wrong or distant. Serena learned to express her needs without fear of rejection. The sessions were tough. We confronted truths we'd both buried. For me, it was admitting how work stress and personal insecurities had drained my emotional energy. For Serena, it was recognizing how loneliness had pushed her toward desires she never thought she'd voice. But amid the hard conversations, we found laughter again. Small moments where we rediscovered each other's quirks, jokes, and old dreams. It was like rebuilding a bridge, one plank at a time. One night, after a session, we cooked dinner together. No distractions, no phones, just us and the sound of chopping vegetables and sizzling garlic. We talked about how far we'd come and how far we still had to go. That night, when we held each other close, it wasn't about physicality or fantasy. It was about connection. Real, messy, imperfect connection. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. The openness Serena's request had forced upon us began to transform our marriage in ways neither of us anticipated. We started experimenting with new ways to express affection and desire without involving anyone else. Date nights became sacred. We took dance classes, went hiking, and even tried painting together. The novelty reignited sparks that had long been smothered under daily stress. But perhaps the most profound change was the honesty. We talked about fears, jealousies, and vulnerabilities we had kept hidden. No longer was there a need to pretend everything was perfect. I learned that vulnerability was strength, not weakness. Serena showed me that trust wasn't just about fidelity, but about emotional transparency. And while the idea of opening our marriage had seemed terrifying, it had cracked open a door to deeper intimacy. One evening, as we sat wrapped in each other's arms, she whispered, "Thank you for trusting me, for trusting us." I smiled, knowing that our journey was far from over, but that we had built a foundation stronger than before. By the time the year marked its turn, our marriage felt both familiar and new, a paradox we were learning to embrace. The experiment, as we called it, had changed everything, but also restored what felt lost. Serena and I no longer tiptoed around difficult subjects. We had cultivated a language of honesty that went beyond words, a look, a touch, a shared silence. Elijah had drifted out of our lives gracefully, as quietly as he had entered. We remained friendly but distant, a boundary we both respected. Our nights were filled with laughter, shared dreams, and a rekindled passion that surprised us both. We explored fantasies, yes, but also focused on building our emotional and spiritual connection. Friends noticed. Some asked questions, others kept their distance. But we were no longer concerned with opinions. We had found our truth. Looking back, I realized that night when Serena asked for another man was not a breaking point. It was a turning point. It forced us to confront our fears, desires, and failures honestly. And in doing so, we found a deeper love. Messy, complicated, but real. Looking back on that night when Serena asked for another man, I realized it was the catalyst for change we desperately needed. It forced us to face the cracks in our marriage we'd long ignored, the silence, the loneliness, the unspoken needs. What followed wasn't perfect. It was messy, emotional, and sometimes painful, but it was real. It was honest. We learned that love isn't just about possession or routine. It's about growth, trust, and courage. About daring to step into the unknown together, even when it scares you. Our journey is far from over. Every day brings new challenges and new opportunities to deepen our connection. But now, we face them hand in hand with open hearts. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from our story, it's this. Marriages can survive the unexpected. They can grow stronger through honesty and vulnerability. And sometimes, love looks different than we ever imagined. Thank you for letting me share this untold trail, the night my wife asked for another man and the road it led us down. May it inspire you to find your own path to truth, healing, and love.